Now more than ever, you need technology you can rely on.
頼れる人ですよね。
I'm a Dell Technologies advisor.
Ich auch.
我也是。
moi aussi.
And if you're a small business, we're with you.
We are with you.
Estamos com você.
We want to help.
So we'll be right here.
At home, answering your calls, providing support.
And standing by you every step of the way.
Bye-bye.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to our attendees from all around the world. On behalf of Thai Silicon Valley, a very warm welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for making our first virtual Road to TiEcon held on June 24th a resounding success. We've received hundreds of messages from all over the world about how much you loved listening to keynotes from Vinod Khosla, Dr. Deepak Chopra, and all of the other wonderful speakers and panelists that we featured. For those of you who are new to TiE, we were founded in 1992 and are today the world's largest network of entrepreneurs with 62 chapters spread over 15 different countries. We have over 13,000 regular members and 2,800 charter members worldwide. Some of you must be wondering what charter members are. These are highly successful entrepreneurs and business leaders that we invite to actually mentor and give back to the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Our charter members have helped scale and guide over 10,000 startups. And this is something that we continue to do. And so it's a very valuable resource that TiE brings to the table. TiE Silicon Valley, per se, we have hosted dozens and dozens of wonderful programs over the course of the year. I just want to highlight a couple of them. We have the TiE Angels, which as the name implies, we actually do diligence and fund different startups. We also have the TYE program, the TiE Young Entrepreneurs. We actually start training entrepreneurs right from the high school age and seed their minds about what entrepreneurship is all about. And this, it's pretty amazing to see what some of these young students are coming up with in terms of business ideas. We also have a program called My Story. This one features entrepreneurs from the Silicon Valley who have recently had exits, which are in excess of $100 million US. Again, this is an extremely successful and well-attended program where these founders talk about their journey, their trials and tribulations, and how they got to the wonderful outcome. At this point, I'd like to acknowledge our sponsors. Megan, if you could please bring back the sponsor slide. And it is because of these sponsors that we're able to have the programming that we do at pretty much minimal or no cost to our entrepreneurs. So our sponsors, thank you once again for your support. Next slide, please. I do also want to acknowledge our Council of Trustees. These are, four of them are past presidents of TiE Silicon Valley. We have Dr. Suhas Patil, Kanwal Rekhi, Vish Mishra, Venk Shukla, and then of course, Vinita Gupta. Again, these are just outstanding business leaders of the Silicon Valley. And this is a council that I myself, as president of TiE Silicon Valley, look up to from time to time for issues that I need help on. Next slide, please. And of course, where would I be without our wonderful board of directors? We have our incoming president-elect, A.G. Karunakaran, Abhi Golap, Kumar Sripadam, Uday Bellari, Paul Singh, Anita Manwani, Andy Sao, Anand Akela, Radhika Iyengar, and Raj Judge. So thank you, our board of directors. Last but not least is our conveners. These are our fearless leaders for the conference. They have put in countless hours, putting together the panels, putting together the different tracks. And I do want to introduce them really quick. So Kumar Sripadam is a technology entrepreneur, business consultant, investor, and a mentor with 30+ years of experience. He's currently a general partner at Elevate Capital. Kumar was a founding member at Redback Networks, a hugely successful IPO company. He has held several senior and executive positions in various companies. He's an executive committee member of Archangel Fund in New York City. He also chairs the TiE Angel Silicon Valley that I had alluded to a little earlier. He has served on the boards of Incentive Logic Inc. and MetaCert. He's an advisor at MOSIF and TrueLark. He's involved in various capacities with several venture funds, angel funds, accelerators, and incubators. As an active investor, he has invested in as many as 70 companies and had several successful exits. He's an active speaker on the topic of entrepreneurship and angel investing. Our next co-founder, Radhika Iyengar, is a TEDx speaker, a Silicon Valley woman of influence, and a serial entrepreneur. She's an expert in enterprise blockchain and digital health, and is the co-author of the book, Enterprise Blockchain Has Arrived. Radhika is a founding partner of StarChain Ventures, a Silicon Valley venture studio focused on the convergence of advanced technologies. She's also a member of the California Governor's Blockchain Working Group, a task force advising Governor Gavin Newsom and the California State Legislature. She's also a board member of TiE Silicon Valley and has been a keynote and panel speaker at Stanford, Harvard, Google, and at top technology conferences. She's multilingual in 9 languages. Radhika is an advisor to top global startups. She advises governments in entrepreneurship and has set up and run accelerators and US market access programs with both Europe and Latin America. With that, over to our conveners. Thank you.
Video, please. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this digital journey, our second Road to TiEcon event today, as we march toward grand finale, the TiEcon 2020 in September. Radhika, you're on mute.
Thanks. Good morning to the US and good evening to India. It's great to be here with all of you.
Sponsor slide, please. First and foremost, we would like to thank our generous sponsors, Dell Technologies, Russell Reynolds and Associates, Silicon Valley Bank, ServiceNow, Freshworks, MGM Resource, Eisner Amper, Zoom, Stellar Development Foundation, Stevens Law Group, and Allied Advisors.
We'd also like to acknowledge and thank our marketing partners, Indica News, 86, Radio Zindagi, 1170 AM, Post Beyond, INDTV USA, and India Community Center.
To put such events, we need a lot of help and tireless efforts. We would like to acknowledge the teams and the volunteer behind all these scenes who have helped make this a reality. Neha Mishra, Nihar Patwardhan, Genevieve Montiel, Nishi Saxena, and Vani Suresh. And let's not forget our great volunteers who helped make this program a success. We'd like to also thank our track chairs for today, starting with Lalit, Mini Suri, Meena Mayappan, Manoj Gupta, Preeti Padman, Tinisha Paikide, Ravinder Paul Singh, and Rajni Shailender.
So before we get kicked off for today's program, we'd like to highlight our grand finale program, Virtual TiEcon on September 2nd and 3rd, with grand keynotes by Ms. Indra Nooyi, former chairman of PepsiCo, Eric Yuen of Zoom, as well as CJ Desai and Fred Luddy of ServiceNow. This year's TiEcon focuses on 3 themes: converge, create, and elevate.
TiEcon 2020 will focus on exciting emerging technologies. On day 1, we have diversity and inclusion, cybersecurity, blockchain and fintech, and Global Connect, along with TiE 50 Showcase, Mentor Connect, startup AI/ML and blockchain bootcamps, and the virtual expo. On day 2, we feature AI/ML, entrepreneurship, health tech, cloud, and VC Connect and TiE Youth, and Mentor Connect and virtual expo, which will continue as well. Today, we have an engaging Road to TiEcon program, starting off with 2 grand keynotes by global luminaries, Shellye Archambeau and Amitabh Kant. After the keynotes, we have 4 concurrent tracks focused on diversity and inclusion, cloud, AI/ML, entrepreneur stress and solutions, as well as global connections.
Thanks, Kumar. So moving on to the highlights of the program, I'll have Kumar kick off the grand keynote session by Shellye Archambeau, and former CEO of MetricStream. And then I will present the next keynote after that.
Thank you, Radhika. So we're all looking forward to this exciting session. And for that, I'm going to introduce Thuy Vu, President of Global Mentor Network, who's going to moderate the keynote session by Shellye, which will actually be in a fireside format. Thuy Vu is a 7-time Emmy Award-winning journalist and is currently co-founder and president of the Global Mentor Network, where she's democratizing mentorship leadership development by providing scalable opportunities for everyone, anywhere, anytime. Prior to the Global Mentor Network, she has had a long career in journalism. Thuy anchored the current affairs program, KQED Newsroom, on PBS stations. She has also been a reporter and anchor for NPR, CBS, and ABC stations. She has also served as an advisor at DocuSign. She is an eminent speaker and moderator and has been featured by major media outlets such as CNN and the New York Times. Thuy immigrated to the US from Vietnam at the end of the war and lived in 2 refugee camps. And a fun fact about Thuy, when she's not busy running her startup, Thuy enjoys serving as board chair at the Real Rail Foundation, the philanthropic arm of Real Rail publicly traded company. And most of all, she enjoys being a mom to her daughter, who just turned 14 yesterday. Hey. And with that, folks, please welcome Shellye Archambeau and Thuy Vu. It's all yours, Thuy. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Kumar. Well, yes, my daughter is now an official high schooler. It's a little scary come this fall, but I'm so happy to be here and to be a part of this. It is truly my pleasure to introduce to you Shellye Archambeau, the former CEO of MetricStream, who Reid Hoffman, the co-founder and former executive chair of LinkedIn, describes as the woman who pulled off the most incredible Silicon Valley turnaround that you never heard of. Archambeau currently sits on the boards of Nordstrom, Verizon, Roper Technologies, and Okta. She advises the Royal Bank of Canada, capital markets, as well as growing startups. She is regularly named on Who's Who lists in technology. She's the author of a new book coming out soon, Unapologetically Ambitious: Take Risks, Break Barriers, and Create Success on Your Own Terms. It's a book that will inspire you and provide the tools that enable you to fight the battles, make the trade-offs, and create the life you want. And by the way, I love giving shameless plugs. You can pre-order it now on Amazon. In her spare time, Shellye runs a gourmet dinner club and writes a blog that provides career advice, insights, and other musings from her career. You can see that by going to shellye.com, and that's SHELLYE.com. So Shellye, great to have you here to kick things off today.
It's wonderful to be here this morning, Thuy.
You look so alert. It's early. For us.
That's right. Well, I've been up since 5, so I had a head start.
Oh my, okay. Well, you really don't need a lot of sleep, judging from your list of, all these accomplishments. Your career is full of first woman of color appointed to the board of Okta. You were one of the first Black women tech CEOs in Silicon Valley. Where does all this ambition come from? Did you have great role models coming when you were growing up and you were surrounded by, or is it much more innate?
It's a really good question, Thuy. Honestly, where my ambition came from was realizing very early in life that the odds weren't in my favor to get what I wanted. I grew up in a suburb of Los Angeles in the racially charged 60s. And as a result, the world, the school, the teachers, the neighbor, everyone made it very clear that I wasn't very welcomed. And that really set about a focus of mine that I realized if I just went through life doing what everybody did, I probably was not going to get what I wanted. So I started early, frankly, to both protect myself and try to ensure that I could actually do some things that I wanted to do by being strategic about the choices I made and being intentional. And that focus started working. And it helped me realize that if I really stayed intentional on setting goals, objectives, et cetera, that I actually could increase the odds of my luck improving and of actually getting to opportunities, et cetera. So it really wasn't my surroundings. It really, in that I didn't have the role models necessarily, but I did realize through great parenting, et cetera, that I actually could take more ownership and responsibility for what was happening to me.
Actually, I would love it if you could expand on that, because there aren't that many successful minority CEOs or executives in Silicon Valley, for example. So what did you do after realizing that you needed to, just do things differently and on your own? What did you do differently in your journey to build this career? What would you say are your superpowers?
So my superpowers, and then I'll talk about superpowers and then what I did to build them. Superpowers are really two. One is discipline. I'm really disciplined, and that helps when you're actually trying to get things done and make progress. And the second one is courage. Both of those, discipline and courage, are both things that I developed. I mean, you're not born with discipline, and you're definitely not born with courage. So, but back to the planning piece and being intentional, what I did was to set goals. I'd say, what do I want to do? At even, as early as high school, all right, I want to be part of a club, and then I want to have a leadership role in the club. Well, what needs to be true for me to actually do that? And then how do I make it true? So that really simple concept, set a goal. What do I want to do? And then what needs to happen to make it true? And then how do I make it true? And being intentional about those steps, and then actually being disciplined to go follow those steps. A lot of people, Thuy, set goals. And some people actually put plans in place to achieve the goals. But very few people make decisions every day consistent with their plans. And that's what I did that was so, I think, unique or different, was to be able to do that.
And as I'm listening to you say all this, it makes me think of something that I read about you in a previous interview, which is you have said that you were not born confident at all. And so, that's easier said than done, right? To fake it till you make it. So you talk about being intentional, but you weren't born with confidence. So how were you intentional without the confidence? How did you pull that off?
And here's where I give a lot of credit, frankly, to my parents as well, because they told us very early in life that life isn't fair. And it was very clear to us that life isn't fair based upon the things that people said to us or did to us, et cetera. So if life isn't fair, then the next point is, so what are you going to do about it? All right. So it's a fact. It wasn't one of those things where you could feel, all right, life isn't fair, so make it fair. No, you're right. Life isn't fair. Flat out, it's not fair. So given that it's not fair, what are you going to do about it? And that was always the question they asked when things would happen. Okay, yep. So what are you going to do about it? And what that caused was, okay, I guess I'm supposed to do something about it, right? And then as you started to do things, and even if you were scared, which, trust me, I was many times in things I did. You're always scared or nervous or what have you. But it was always that knowing that I had at least the support of my family, et cetera. So, okay, it's like jumping into a pool, right? It's cold. You can't go a toe at a time. You just got to jump in. Well, it's the same thing. But the more often you do it, the easier it becomes. So, having the courage is really just a muscle. The first time you're scared to death, and then you realize, ooh, I didn't die when I stood up in front of a group of 1,000 people and spoke. Okay, so the next time it's like, oh, I survived. And it becomes easier and easier. So I tell people, having courage, it's a muscle. Just practice it. Do things that you're uncomfortable with and just keep doing them. It will get so much easier. So the fake it till you make it when you don't have confidence, it's almost like pretending you're an actor or an actress, right? It's like, okay, put on your role, put on your face, step forward and do it. And eventually you'll feel comfortable when you do it. But yes, the fake it till you make it I've done forever, because imposter syndrome's real. And I still suffer from it at times.
It worked for you, obviously. You made it. You know, you faked it, now you've made it. And to your point, courage, that's so important, especially in business, right? Because you have to take risks when you're in business. How does taking risk factor into your career plans?
Oh, huge. So first of all, if you don't take risk, then it's very hard to actually progress your career and make an impact. I've always believed that risk and opportunity are two sides of the exact same coin. So if you want opportunities, you've got to take risk. But the key is taking risk that is rational, right, and reasonable. So it doesn't mean take any risk that's out there. So I always talk about doing your homework. You know, homework doesn't stop in school. I still do homework. Homework is just doing research, getting background, getting information so that you can be more informed about the decisions you're getting ready to make. So when you face a risk, you know, especially in business, and oh my gosh, entrepreneurship, I mean, risks are hourly, right? You know that, Thuy. I mean,
sometimes by the half hour, by the quarter of an hour.
Exactly. So you have to take risks, but when you do, you know, and they work out. You know, one of the things that I've always asked myself before I took a big risk is, okay, done the work, I understand the risks, the downsides, etc. What is the worst that can happen? And can I live with it? And if I can live with it, then you know what? I'm taking the risk.
Yeah.
So I firmly believe that I never would have achieved the things I've achieved if I didn't take risks. I took risks all the way through. I took jobs that were going to be harder. You know, I took roles, all kinds of things that were not expected to be successful. But all of those things give you opportunities to prove your capability and build skills as well as results that enable you to build upon those foundations.
What would you say then is the biggest career risk you ever took, and how did that work out?
So the biggest risk was becoming CEO of the company that ultimately became MetricStream. So you have to picture this. It's 2002 timeframe. Yeah, end of 2002, beginning of 2003. So the dot-com bubble, for those that are old enough to remember.
Well, I remember, that was painful.
Oh, very. The dot-com bubble had burst, right? Companies have gone out of business. And I'm ready for my CEO job. Well, there are now hundreds of CEOs in Silicon Valley looking for jobs that have CEO experience because their companies have gone under, right?
Yeah.
I haven't been a CEO before. I'm not from the Valley. I'm not an engineer. And I don't really look like the stereotypical, you know, startup CEO either, right? Yeah. So all of that says, odds are not in my favor. So I knew I was not going to get an A play, a company that the VC firms felt was absolutely going to be successful. Those would go to people they know and have confidence in. So I said, you know what? CEO is on my list. I'm ready. I'm going to go after a company that needs fixing. So a company that needs, but I wanted a top tier VC firm. So I took the job of CEO at a company called Zaplet. Vinod Khosla was the partner. And Vinod hired me. And this company was very broken. I mean, it was on its way out of business. Most of the investors had, you know, basically written it off. So here I am in the worst economic times. Exactly, right? In the worst economic time ever, taking over a company that is dying.
Yeah.
So you could say, whoa, why did you do that? Well, I did it because I was ready for my CEO job. And I'd done the work. I knew the technology was solid. And all I needed to do was to find a problem that we could solve, right? And then build it. And what was the worst that could happen? The company failed. Well, nobody expected it to survive, right? So could I live with that? I could totally live with that. But if it worked, this could be amazing. And the good news is it worked. And it's now an amazing company. It's a leader in governance, risk, and compliance with customers all over the world. And I'm very proud of what we were able to accomplish as a team.
That is a great story. Okay, what about conversely? What if you take a risk and it doesn't work out? Has that happened to you? And any tips for how to handle a huge setback like that?
Oh, sure. So, gosh, probably the big one would be I'd been at IBM. I spent my first 14 years at IBM because originally my plan was to be CEO of IBM.
Great goal.
Absolutely. And I didn't do too badly. I actually got to the point where my boss worked for Lou Gerstner and there wasn't anyone hiring me in the company that looked like me. So I'd done quite well. But it wasn't clear I was going to be CEO. So I said, you know what, let me go, right? Let me go make a change. So I actually left IBM and joined Blockbuster back in the heyday. This was 1998, 99 timeframe.
Yeah.
And I was hired to build Blockbuster.com. I was president of Blockbuster.com, and it was to build out for them what they described as the future, right, of delivering movies online, all these things, right? Wonderful. So left IBM, moved my family, all these things. But it became very obvious when my CEO, to cut a long story short, when my CEO turned down the opportunity to basically combine Blockbuster.com and Netflix and go conquer the world. Oh yeah.
Goodness.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So when he turned that down, I was like, okay, I'm in the wrong place. So nothing like having to come to your family that you just uprooted, moved, got settled into a new place to say, this isn't working. And by the way, I need to get to Silicon Valley. So we need to move again. So, how do you handle it? You handle it by realizing the situation, cutting your losses. I wasn't going to fix this. So there was no sense to hanging around for the next several years, right? So cut your losses, take the assessment, and then put a plan in place for how you get yourself back on track, and then go execute it. So it's all about being intentional.
That is such great advice. I wanted to also switch gears just a little bit and talk about what is so in the headlines these days. There's a lot of focus right now on racial inequality driven by growing support for the Black Lives Matter movement. Why do you think there's such a glaring lack of people of color in senior positions, in executive leadership positions at companies and corporations? And what does corporate America need to do to really effectively address this problem, to make real long-lasting changes?
Oh gosh, in terms of the why, there's 400 years of history in this country. That is the why. So the why is a very broad set of answers that basically is there's a lot of bias, even unrealized and unrecognizable bias that exists in so many systems. There's also systemic issues that have created situations that make it very difficult for African Americans. So the combination of why is actually a very, very deep rooted.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, in terms of what companies need to do, I will tell you for the first time ever, I'm actually cautiously optimistic that we can start to actually change the trajectory of how things have worked, because businesses are getting engaged. For the first time, Thuy, we're actually having conversations about race. I mean, that used to be a very you never raised it. It was not a discussion point. And if you don't talk about it, it's hard to actually understand what's transpiring. So the fact that we're talking about it is good. The fact that companies are stepping up and making donations and making statements is good. But frankly, none of that is sufficient. What companies need to do is actually take action. And it first starts at home. Look at your own organizations and do the assessment. It's almost like an audit. Do we have unconsciously, do we have systems that actually perpetuate the current status quo?
Yeah.
Right? Do we have processes or practices that actually perpetuate it? So we need to actually look to objectively, right, determine where do we actually need to make some changes here. And we need to listen to our employees, because trust me, they can tell you if you listen. And then secondly, we need to engage with our communities as business leaders to make sure that our communities and our governments, right, local and broader, but know that this is actually an important issue for us. And let's make sure that we're taking collective action as a society, right, to improve the overall situation. So actions internally, but also actions externally. I think it's important for business to use their voice to share that they believe that we need to make a change.
Yeah, and I do find it so interesting and also optimistic that the conversation you're referring to is happening across the board by people who have never been part of the conversation in the past even, but now are very engaged and want to learn more. Everything from 18-year-olds that I know who are now awakening to it, and also older executives. And one of the most interesting things, one of the most salient points that I've seen on this is that actually a friend of yours, Melody Hodson, who heads Ariel Investments, she wrote a wonderful review of your book, by the way. And she said in an article in the New York Times that, you know, corporations measure everything, but they don't measure diversity and inclusion. So few of them do. And we are so behind the times on that.
Yes, we really are. And I'm fortunate because a number of the companies on whose board I sit actually do. It is part of the overall metrics, et cetera. So yes, if you care about something, I mean, in business, it's business 101. You learn this in school, right? If you care about something and you want to see improvement, you have to measure it. Full stop. You don't set revenue targets and then never look at it.
Yeah.
You don't set profit targets and then not pay attention to the trends or the trajectory. Right? So it's no different when you're looking at the talent of your organization, because frankly, for most companies, the talent, the people, the team, they make the company. And we've all seen, there's thousands of reports that will show that diversity of all types actually improves overall outcomes and results. So this is not rocket science. It just takes focus. And I'm going to go back to the word that I feel so strongly about. It's being intentional. It's being intentional. I had just a quick one. I had a conversation with a CEO just yesterday. He was talking about building diversity within his board. And I said, you know, the key is to think about diversity from the beginning. Because when you're first building anything, a team, a board, right, a unit, it doesn't matter. When you're first building it, you need to fill all roles. So you're really wide open on all the different needs and requirements you have. That's the time to start thinking about diversity, because you can use people in so many different roles. What happens is people think about at the end, and now I have one slot, one role, and it's defined like this. And then I complain, but I can't find anybody. Well, yeah, that's because you made it this small. If you looked in the very beginning, you could have been filling up your ranks, right? So
I so agree with that. I know that we also have a lot of entrepreneurs and also senior leaders and corporate executives in the audience. And I think we're all facing, me included, facing unprecedented challenges at this time, leading a company, leading a startup during a pandemic and an economic downturn. What is your biggest advice for them about how to lead through this crisis, to not only survive, but perhaps to also thrive in the future once we're on the other side of this?
Absolutely, and I've led through a number of major crises, the dot-com bust, 2008, I mean, you name it. So number one is focus. When you go through a crisis, focus is imperative. Not just your focus, but ensuring that your entire organization is very focused on what is critical. Not nice to have, but critical. And therefore, as leaders, you have to be in front. You need to be communicating all the time. The once a month, you know, team meetings or all hands are not good enough when you're going through a crisis. You need to be communicating all the time, and your leaders need to be communicating with their teams all the time. Even if there isn't anything new to say, they just need to see you, to know that you're in charge, to know, right, that they're going to be okay, in essence, and to know that you care about them. Because people are struggling individually too, and they need to be seen as whole people. So that's one, the focus, the communications, and then, you know, never waste a crisis. Make sure you're also looking at, once you've steeled the ship, you know, and by now you should have, which is you're looking at your financials and your customers, is everybody safe, right? I mean, you've got all that, but now is the time to be reevaluating and reassessing your strategy, because COVID, racial injustice, it's changing the world. Behaviors are changing. So if behaviors are changing, you need to make sure that the strategy you have in place is still the right strategy going forward. And two, whenever you have a crisis, whatever trends were underway or just beginning before the crisis, get accelerated. So look what's happened. Work from home. Some people were doing, everybody. Online shopping used to be less than 10%, frankly. Now, right, it's probably in the 30s to 40%. Everything, what we do with video conferencing, right, boom, trends, all. So look at the trends that affect your business and make sure that you are staying ahead of it for when you come out of this, that you are able to actually thrive because you've been retooling, refocusing, right? Recharging your company towards those new trends. So it's all about focus. It's all about communications. It's all about strategy, right? Reevaluation. And then last point is it's also a great time to also look at your partnerships. Because for the same reason, your partners are also going through different situations, different challenges, and there might be opportunities to gain new partnerships, and or there might be some that you need to change. So all of that needs to be reevaluated right now so that you can take the steps that need to be taken for when you come out of this.
And for our entrepreneurs out there, you kind of alluded to this, take a look at what's out there. There are some opportunities. Oh, is this a good time to start a company? And what about for female tech entrepreneurs specifically who have been in the past, held back, very little VC money goes to them, as we all know. Is this environment where people are more open to new ways of thinking? Is it more fertile ground now for female tech entrepreneurs?
So the answer is, I think in general, yes, it's a good time to start a company if you can capitalize on some of these new trends and disruptive trends. There's going to be a lot of disruption coming out of this because, to my point, because trends are changing, buyer behavior is changing, consumer behavior is changing, that creates new opportunities and new disruptions. And large companies tend to move slow. So if you can find a disruptive area, right, to really wedge into, now's a great time in terms of starting a company. So that's one. Two, with regards to women, absolutely. But I would tell you, women and people of color in general, there are more funds out there today, venture funds, PE funds, right, et cetera, that are focused on women and people of color than ever before, ever before. So I think the opportunity right now is actually a terrific opportunity.
Fantastic. And once you start something, building and scaling a business is not easy. What characteristics would you say are most important in leaders as they do that?
All right, so let me talk about one specific and then I'll bring up a couple. So one is, let me tell you a mistake that I see too many entrepreneurs make. They fall in love with their product.
Oh,
now you might, right? Now you might sit
their
there and say,
baby.
exactly, yes. And I mean, when you have a baby, I mean, nobody can tell you your baby's ugly. I mean, oh, no. They just haven't seen it right? They just haven't. Well, the problem is if you fall in love with the product, then you're really not able to hear clearly the feedback, the input, because you know better than anybody else does, right, about your product. What you need to do is fall in love with your market. Because when you fall in love with something, you are very protective of it. You cater towards it, right? You try to make sure every need is met. You listen, right? All those things you do when you fall in love. Fall in love with your market so that you can actually hear and see and anticipate changes, needs, requirement. Companies that fall in love with their market are—
I haven't heard that phrase, fall in love with your market. I love it.
Good. But yes, that's my number one advice. And if you fall in love with your market, as your market changes, you'll be able to adapt, change, and anticipate, and therefore you'll be able to grow. So that's number one. Number two, it's all about the team. It's all about the team. So as you're bringing people on board to your team, yes, you need to look at what needs to happen now, but always keep an eye out for where you're trying to go so that you can hire people that can grow with you. And when they can't, then you have to make changes. And trust me, that's hard. It's probably one of my biggest challenges. So the team is super important in scaling. And then third part is advisors. Get advisors outside of the company who you can share with, learn from, who have been there, done that before, so that you don't have to go through every single mistake that a leader goes through when they're scaling a company.
That's interesting. And what, because I know that you know a lot of leaders, what are some of the biggest mistakes you've seen leaders make as they're trying to build a business?
Oh, goodness. All right, so let's see. Probably Probably one of the top ones is, it goes back to kind of the market or their customer, but they get too far away from the customer. Is number one. Or number two, they aren't staying in line with where the market is going, and they aren't really listening, right, to what's happening. The other thing I see is they don't have the right people in the right jobs, which makes it very difficult to execute. They don't manage their culture and development of the culture. And suddenly, as they grow and scale, it just gets out of control. And that's just really, really not only bad for the company, but it actually can be dangerous in terms of, you don't want bad behaviors in your company. You have to be intentional about the culture that you are trying to build. We see so many examples of that, right? In the news all the time.
Just look at Silicon Valley alone. That's where I live. It's just many examples.
Yeah, exactly. You know, people, you need to manage the money. I mean, it's all about cash. More companies go out of business because they run out of money versus not actually having a solution that works. You can have a very workable solution, right? A very good opportunity in the marketplace, but if you mismanage the cash, it's not happening.
All valuable advice. I know you're a big believer in planning. Can you tell us more about your philosophy around that and how it has influenced your career? Absolutely. So I touched on it a bit when I talked about, I always think about goals in terms of what needs to be true and how do I make it true. But even if with regards to every step in my career has always been a plan. You know, right now I sit on Fortune 500 boards. Well, I decided in my 30s that that's what I wanted to do one day. And therefore, I told you, I set goals. Unapologetically ambitious.
I am. So as soon as I got my CEO job, right, the very next thing I went after was getting my first board seat. Because the number one, I did the research, back to homework, did the homework. The number one requirement for boards is they want board members who have board experience. Obviously, that's a catch-22.
Sure.
So I said, all right, let me work hard to get my first board. So I will at least have experience when I'm ready to go after my broad board experience, right? And so that's what I did. But
what was the first board you sat on?
Sure, it was called Arbitron. Arbitron, some of you may remember, but they did media ratings for radio, outdoor advertising, et cetera. So you'd have the Arbitron ratings on the radio.
I know Arbitron very well because, you know, I spent many years.
That's right.
So.
Exactly. So yes, and they were ultimately bought, I was on the board 7 years, and then they were bought by Nielsen.
Okay. Well, how did you get that first board position? Because as you said, boards want people who had board positions before, but you didn't have it.
Exactly. It turns out, even though they say that, about, 25% of board seats go to people who are new board directors. But the way I did it was I did the research on what boards are typically looking for. I then started telling everybody I was interested in serving on a board and here's the experience that I could bring. And ultimately it was a recruiter that reached out to me and made the connection with Arbitron. And after going through the interview process, et cetera, I got the job. Fabulous.
We do have some audience questions. I want to transition to that now and make sure we get some of them in for you.
Great.
So first, this question, great story of a great CEO, inspiring, and loves your point about risk and opportunity are two sides of the coin. But the question is, what should we do? Being passionate about your work or work on what you're passionate about?
I honestly think they can totally be combined. For instance, what I have found is when you start working at something and you become good at it, even if you don't start out good at it, once you start to get good at it, you actually start to enjoy it and become passionate about it. So and there's an interesting book, if you haven't read Grit by Angela Duckworth. She actually makes this point really well. It's called Grit, G-R-I-T. But when you think about your passions, people tell people all the time to follow their dreams. And I think that's terrible advice. Because we tell people that when they're young, Well, heck, when I'm 18, 20, 22 years old, I've had this much experience in life, right? Really small amount of experience in life. I haven't had a broad set. How do I know all that I could be interested in? And so therefore, what I tell people is, a dream and a goal, the only difference between a dream and a goal is whether you have a plan and a timeline. So follow your dreams? No, I'm like, no, set some goals. Set some goals. And even if you don't know exactly what you want to do, build up skills that give you more and more options as you go forward. So when you figure out what you want to do, you have a good base for it. So I know I'm a little counter, but no, I believe being more intentional.
I hadn't really thought about it that way, but you're right. Go follow your dreams is so nebulous. And if you're young, you haven't had life experience, you think, oh, I can do anything, as opposed to actually being much more targeted. And I wrote down Grit by Angela Duckworth. I'm going to go get that book.
Good.
All right, here's another question for you. What was the seemingly most impossible ambition or goal you set for yourself and ended up achieving it?
Well, I'll be candid. I set the goal of becoming a CEO when I was in high school.
Holy moly.
I know. I told you I've been intentional my whole life. Crazy. But actually, the reason that happened is a meeting with a guidance counselor. I'm 16. You have that obligatory meeting with the guidance counselor. And she says, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to go to college. And she goes, well, what do you want to do after college? I said, I'm not sure. I want a job that allows me to keep my home warm, because that was my main driver in life. Our house was freezing growing up because we didn't have a lot of excess money. And so she said, well, what do you like to do? And I said, well, I love running my clubs. And I rattled them off, et cetera. She said, well, running a business is not much different than running a club. And I said, done. Because again, it's just pick something, right? Now, so at the time, that was super audacious. This was the 70s. There wasn't anyone running companies that looked like me. So when you talk about what is the most audacious goal, that was it. Becoming a CEO was absolutely it for me.
And I love that story because, there's also another saying about the importance of role models. If you can see it, you can be it. So now people look at you and go, okay, Shellye did it. Maybe I can be like Shellye. But you didn't have anyone that you could point to at that time and say, oh, she did it. And I find that inner strength so amazing. And you have said that people should strengthen their strengths, not their weaknesses. And that runs counter to conventional wisdom because, most people would say, oh, identify your weaknesses, work on those. Can you expand on your belief around that? And why is it so important to focus on strengths?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's your strengths that differentiate you. Right? If you think about people that become strong leaders or have strong impact in any business or industry, it's because of a certain capability, right? Really good at creating product or really great, right? At getting deals, or whatever it happens to be. Well, you want to make those stronger so that you stand out even more and you can impact even more. It doesn't help you to strengthen weaknesses because that just brings you to average. For all of us have unique skills and capabilities. And we have areas that are stronger than others. So I'm a believer in strengthen your strengths. Now, if you have a weakness that's a detractor, you need to bring it up to parity, but don't bother trying to make it a strength because that is not going to differentiate you and enable you to actually build your skill and be impactful, right? Going forward. It would make no sense to tell Steve Jobs to try to improve his, hygiene.
Wardrobe.
Wardrobe, whatever. I mean, you know what I mean? That wouldn't have helped, right? He was a genius in his area and he needed to keep focusing on that. And he did, right? So pick your strength and focus on it.
I love it. You've had such an incredible, inspiring journey. If you could go back now to your 20-year-old self, what would you tell your 20-year-old self?
Make sure that people know what you do. We all think, or we're told anyway, just work hard, put your head down, work hard, and it's all going to happen. And that's not true. Because people don't know what you do unless you tell them. So you have to develop ways. And my favorite way of doing that is people ask you all the time, Thuy, how are you? And you say, great, fine, good, right? No, instead say, I'm doing great. We just closed a round of funding for blah, blah, blah. I'm doing fantastic. I just got a major program launched, right, for a customer. So it can take 20 seconds.
Yeah.
But tell people what you do. And that way they know and can remember and think about you when opportunities come forward.
Well, not only that, that may spark follow-up questions by them, right? Oh, I didn't know you were working on that. Tell me more.
Exactly.
Okay, so we are approaching the end here, but I do have one final question for you. As a self-described ambitious woman, what is your biggest ambition now?
Oh my goodness. My biggest ambition now is, and why I'm taking time to speak at things like this, I am frankly just trying to impact and inspire the next generation so that more people can achieve their aspirations. Because frankly, I find it very frustrating that so many people, especially women and especially people of color, don't get the opportunity to demonstrate their full capabilities. And so I want that to happen. And so I'm trying to share tips and things that I learned to make that happen, like being intentional, like having people know what you do, like all these things we're talking about. And all of it is covered in the book so that more people can achieve their aspirations professionally and personally in life. So that's my goal.
And we so appreciate that. Paying it forward, really taking your experience and benefiting the next generation. Really appreciate that. Your new book, Unapologetically Ambitious, can be pre-ordered now on Amazon. I hope that everyone goes out and pre-orders it. It's a phenomenal book with lots of great advice, actionable advice. Shellye Archambeau, such a pleasure to have you with us. And what a great way to kick off Road to TiEcon.
Well, thanks very much, Thuy. I've enjoyed it. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the sessions.